All right, welcome to the Messenger Movement podcast. I am so excited to have a bunch of messengers on today. It's rare that we have so many, but we've got another book in queue, and you have to get your hands on it. It is called Sacrificial Love: Husbands and Wives Tell All. The marriage I didn't say I do to. Dun, dun, dun. And I don't know about you guys, but we're going to get into a storyline with each of these authors. But I literally asked before we hit record here who is experiencing the sacrifice of love, a sacrificial love in their marriage right now, and they have authorship to this book. And everyone, well, not everybody, I was vulnerable enough. There's me and my hubby. We're raising our hands. And the Lord will do this in a good way. And I think sometimes we hand the microphone over to the enemy and be like, oh, the enemy is attacking us. Oh, we've got this that we're walking through, and it's the enemy's will, it's the enemy's doing. But sometimes I really feel like the Lord is calling us in. Like he's calling us into those seasons in order, not necessarily, people say, to test you, but for him to train you up, to raise you up, to mature you, to call you deeper still into his love, his sacrificial love, ultimately, and what he did on the cross. So I want to be able to share a bit about the stories that you're going to read more about. They really have a vast array of experiences, because every marriage does, every testimony does. There's husbands and wives on the call right now that you get to tune into and hear. There's single women, there's single men that decided to say yes to this experience. And I had so many marriages on my mind when the Lord dropped Sacrificial Love. I had people who have walked through loss and grief. I've thought about divorce. I thought about people who passed away and were left grieving in that. We thought about infidelity. We thought about financial struggle. We thought about relational struggle and parenting struggles. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so we're certain that you have a sacrificial love story as well. And we want this to be serving you, not just to hear other people's stories, but also as a curriculum, as a guide for you to be able to say yes to the next season of hardship, to the next valley moment, because it's promised that we're going to have trials and tribulations, and we want you to make it through. We are advocates for marriage. We're advocates for sacrificial love and what that looks like in our marriage. So first up, drum roll, I'm going to give the microphone to my hubby, who has never actually been on my podcast before. So babe, thanks for hanging out with me today and all the other authors. And I want to hear a bit about just your posture and saying yes to even being an author, to sharing your
Mm,
testimony like this, and what sacrificial love means to you.
yeah, thank you. Love you, baby. Thank you for this. So I mean, it's really changed through the seasons, right? So like when I proposed to you in 2011, we're not in a spiritual maturity at that age. Like we're so young, we're babies, we're trying to figure things out on the run. I don't know that we quite had the leadership skills or the leadership through mentors that we really would have positioned ourselves to give us the best chance for success, especially of what we want for our children, right? We want our kids, like we look forward to, as our kids are engaging in future marriage, and they're only 10 and 11 years old, but um, we're just looking like, what does a biblical foundation for relationship look like for them? What does practicing sacrificial love look like for them? Because I definitely didn't have it as I asked you to marry me. And in a marriage, like especially in this season, biblical significance is the most important thing, I think. Um, Sacrificial love means mirroring Christ's love for the church by prioritizing my wife, her well-being, her needs, her desires, even when it requires personal sacrifice from me, which actually is a little bit of a gift of mine. I typically do that anyways, but it wasn't always biblically rooted. So that's the major key component. I have often served in our dating to our engagement years, to our marriage years, but not with a biblical foundation. Now it's like, tell me where the passage is where it says that this is okay to do this in the Bible. I often say this now where we're at in our deep conversations. Like we have a lot of deep conversations over coffee in the morning, sometimes 4 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m. We just try and create the space before the kids wake up or before I'm at work or before she's doing podcasts or whatever the case is. Um, so it brings me to Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And that's the passage where Christ is the model. That's the passage where we're putting others first is the most important. That's the passage where serving and caring is so important. But most importantly, there's an unconditional love. And an unconditional love, as we all know, the most basic definition of that is loving under any condition or loving without conditions, right? So no matter what the circumstances, like our vows say, like better or worse, richer or poorer, healthy or sick, right? And it's not until you have to put that to the test where you really realize what sacrificial love means. Um, so for the good of the relationship, again, it's not about it being a one-sided giving. It's about loving your spouse like Christ loves the church. And that's what the sacrificial lens.
That's so good, baby. I love
Yeah,
you. I just
I
think
love you
like the
too.
mutuality of the way that we've walked through our marriage, and one of the things that we really hone into specifically on
Mm,
this chapter was this idea of like falsely idolizing our spouse,
mm,
and the struggle of what that was. And I loved
yes.
how you shared specifically under the difference between sacrificing yourself unbiblically and what that
Mm,
looked like, whether it was people pleasing,
yep.
whether it was trauma induced,
Mm,
whether it was fear based response, because neither of us are good at fighting. We're both flighters. We're both like, bye, we're not going to talk to each other, and then it'll just go away. And healthy communication, healthy conflict is something we had to learn pretty early on in our marriage. But for us to unveil the fact of that false idolization can happen very early, and also even years later, right? Where I knew I don't want to idolize anyone or anything over Christ. And yet there had been this like seeping in of your husband always serves. Your husband always gives. Your husband always. And we don't like to use always or never in our household because that's just simply not true. And I had just really had this false belief that he didn't struggle in a lot of these areas until those areas were revealed. And so we talk about those areas in our chapter. I'm not going to give away all the goods, but just grateful that we can do this together, babe, because it's something that
I love you.
we know we get to serve in a marriage realm a lot intimately, but we've never really
Mm,
done it on a public platform. So we're
yeah.
proud of you for being bold and brave and sharing.
Yeah, of course. I love you so much. Thank you for
Love
the
you.
space. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited for what the future holds with us.
Well, let's talk to another couple here. They've got a totally different testimony, but we honor the fact that their children are growing and grown, and they even have a grandbaby. And I process that and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even think about that. But it's so exciting to see how their legacy has really been left already through the sacrificial love that their relationship has shared. It hasn't been easy. So, Kess and Steve, you guys, I want you just to get into the story however it is that you see fit.
You want to start, my love? Or okay, got me. All right.
Already
So
sacrificing.
all the stuff we went through was just to get us to this grandparent stage because it's awesome, right?
Aw.
So so if we had to do it all over again, and I
Amen.
knew this was the reward, then okay, it's cool. It's cool. Um, and then there's a bigger reward waiting for us. So that's even better yet, right? So um for us, there was a lot of similarities into what Gary was talking about as far as the beginnings, right? And going at going at things with kind of more of a worldly view than a godly view. And hey, society says you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. This is what success looks like. This is what a marriage looks like. And we bought into the lie. And and we all know that marriage is so easy, right? It's just like a walk in the right. It's just like there's never any problems, there's never anything, right? So no, it kind of sucks, most of the time. But it's tough,
It's
right?
all
I
in
mean,
this book,
God
you
puts a
guys.
man and a woman into a home together. It says, hey, sleep in a bed, make decisions together, figure out money, do all these things, and we're about as opposite gets. And it says, okay, now get along, right? And it's like,
So true.
then throw kids into the mix, throw grandkids, just do all this, right? So it's just like, holy moly, what were you thinking, right? So, but hey, it's these things that kind of help us to and condition us to be better and better Christians as well. So for us, it was, we were coming at it similar in that unbiblical way, but we brought a little other background into it. Kess in particular was severely abused throughout most of her life for 15 plus years, and really hadn't dealt with the effects of it yet. Right? I mean, it was when she and I got together, it was kind of her escape, more or less, to get away from that. And then you got the struggles of a new marriage, and my view of what a man's supposed to be, and how people should or shouldn't talk to each other and do those types of things, right? So just kind of compounded. Right. So we went through years of trying to figure out what in the world was going on. Mental health issues. Is it chemical imbalances? Is it all these types of things? And during that time, I mean, thankfully today, mental health is something that's spoken about more openly and more freely. But you go back 25, almost 30 years ago, when we were getting together and getting married, it's like you didn't talk about it, right? I mean, it was taboo, and so that was part of the struggles as well. And then me as a man, I had my own issues, my own baggage that I brought into the relationship. But I'm a man; I don't talk about those. I don't deal with those. There's nothing wrong with me, so we're all good. We're all cool. I'm going to fix her, right? And so that's what a lot of the stories about is the idea of, okay, she's got the problem. I'm going to fix her. And it wasn't until really waking up and realizing, you know what, dude, you got your own problems. And you got to figure out your own problems and work on yourself, or it's never going to be better. And in that journey, for me, for my side, in that journey is when I really started to walk with the Lord. And I would step into faith, and then something would happen. I'd step back. I'd step into faith. I'd step back. But then I just kind of went all in. And at that point is when that what we were talking about earlier, that unconditional love really started to step in, and it was a different kind of love. After all these traumatic events that happened throughout our marriage, it became a not trying to fix Kess, but loving her for who she is. And the traumas, the struggles are not who she is, but they're part of what made her who she is, right? So they're real, and I love her, and I've loved her from the first time I set eyes on her, and it's like, and I even open it in my paragraph about she was walking in front of me in these white jean cutoff shorts and a purple tank top. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I needed to get to know her, like they say in the Bible, know her, and so and it was so I just remember, but I just kept falling in love with her, falling in love with her, falling in love with her. And I just had this deep love, but it's a different love. God's love is different than what society teaches us. We'll say silly things like, "Oh, I love this podcast. This is great." I love the colors you got behind you. I love the books you got behind you. And we use that word like it's so nonchalant, like it's nothing. But love is so much deeper than that. I mean, you really read in First Corinthians, you read God's definition of love. It's hard. It's an action. Like, you got to every day make a choice to move forward and act on it. And that's what I started to learn, was that's what needed to be done. Like, I needed to do that and stop trying to live up to what society was saying and live for what God was saying in love. But I've taken up all the time, so I'll let my beautiful wife say what she wants to say.
I love it.
No, that was awesome. It was perfect, as far as the explanation. And, when he was originally looking to be a part of this book, he was like, no, but God kept prompting him and was just like, no, we need your voice. And that's kind of one of the things that's been resonating to me in our chapter also and just in kind of the life that we've been walking out with Bible studies and other couples. And there's just not enough men out there willing to share their side of the story and be vulnerable. And too many men are suffering in silence, thinking that it's me. I mean, I just heard a story yesterday about a guy spending 37 years wrestling with depression, not realizing that other men wrestled with depression. We think nowadays that everybody understands this, but they don't. And not enough people are willing to talk about it. So I'm so thankful, that my husband obeyed God and walked into this journey, and we get to do it as a couple. And, love having Gary and the other guys that are part of it, and all of us women are always willing to share, but we just have less men.
Mostly.
So, and I know Steve's super happy Gary popped on.
Yes,
He
I
now
know,
understands
I
that
know.
he's not the only man.
We
So.
do. We've got Joshua and Joe, who are both also writing alongside their spouses. So you're not going to hear their voices today, but you will when you pick up the book for sure.
Yeah. So pretty much, he said it all, it's just part of our story and how we're walking through it. And how do you decide to still stay in your marriage when you're not liking your spouse, or when you're not, and it's back to what he was saying, love is an action. God's love is different than the world love. And it's, people using this book in order to break those lies and those stories and those facades, to really live a true marriage of happiness and joy.
Mm.
And I guess just to add on to that, it's you read our chapter. I mean, we've gone through some pretty negative things, right? Things that you believe what society says. We should have been divorced 100 times. Like for point A, B, C, D, and E, right? Each one of them should have led to an 80% divorce rate, right? And so you couple them all together. But what I love in our story, not the book story, our real life story, which mirror each other, but is that with God you can get through those things. We're not a statistic. You don't need to worry about statistics. God can do anything and everything, and there's hope, right? So people that are struggling, they don't even want to walk in the front door, when they get home from work because they're afraid of what's happening when they walk in. No, there's hope. There is, and I've seen it. I've seen the miracles, and it's there. So so it's just some of the stories that lead up to that, in our chapter, anyhow.
That's so good. And like the fact that you're living that out alongside other married couples through the Bible studies, through the opportunity to just do life with people, I think is so critical. And I think when we were young, we had a lot of our own friend groups, right? You kind of like do that blending of friend groups. I'm going to go hang out with my friends and you go hang out with your friends. And then as we've gotten older, we've gotten couple friends together. And it's like, oh, we have to hang out with that couple again. I don't really drive with him as much as you drive with her. And like, oh, you're going to them. I don't really drive with her as much as you drive with him. And there's like that whole season of friendships. That's a whole nother book probably. But I love the vulnerability that you guys share in this, and the fact that, yes, your testimony has all of these moments of divorce. And I remember having marriage mentors for the first time, which was just a couple of years ago. And they said, we nearly got divorced 4 times, and they've been married now for 45 years. And I'm like, 4 times? That's once a decade. That seems like I could handle that. But I'm in the same stats right now, just a couple decades behind. And I'm like, this is real. Like, we've actually said that word in conversations. I've actually contemplated those things. And it's not an enemy strategy. I think the ease of what the enemy has made it is a strategy.
Yes.
But there is biblical elements to this. So as I celebrate marriage and I say we're pro-marriage, I also know that there are valid reasons that people leave marriages. And so please hear our hearts in this and know that that's not the point of the book, is like, stay married at all costs, because some costs are not Christ, okay? However, there are many things that people will immediately jump ship because it's hard.
Yes.
And that is why we wrote this book. And that is what the victory curriculum is all about, is to say, stay. And that's what the Lord has told me audibly, stay. And I'm like, but that doesn't give me a solution. That doesn't help me. I don't feel seen in that, God. That's not what I want to do in my flesh. We know we're not supposed to follow our flesh anyway, but we do so often, and I just don't want people to miss it, because what you're missing is this celebration side of what Steve and Kess are saying, the celebration side of what Gary and I are saying. Even when we're still literally walking through a valley right now, we can still pause and celebrate, because God is better. He is bigger. His ways are higher. His thoughts are higher. And he loves us so well that we understand if we stay, there's still goodness here. There's promise here because of the covenant love. And so Michelle and Jennifer, who are on the call with us today, have different stories, obviously connected to this. And I'm excited for them to share because specifically, Dr. Michelle, you talk about grief in a really profound way. And I think people don't anticipate, again, you're at that like moment of ceremony. I do, kiss the bride. And the better or worse that Gary alluded to for those vows, whether you said your own or you said the traditional ones, you like aren't thinking about that. And grief is a huge conversation that most people don't know how to wrestle with because they're not taught when they're young, just like we're not taught how to handle depression or taught how to handle trauma.
Right.
Talk to us about what that experience was like. Tell us just a brief about your chapter. Don't give away all the goods.
Give away it all. I love everything that was said so far because grief, at least I was told, is one of the top 2 or 3 reasons that you have divorce. Grief, money, and probably sex is in there too. And so walking through as much grief as Preston and I have walked through, we should have been divorced 4 or 5 times as well. And I'm so grateful for God. One of the things that Gary said that I loved is about that unconditional love. And it rang true because just 2 years ago, I'm 55, so 53 years, I'm living in this idea. My dad, I was the apple of his eye. I was a baby only. Brother and sister didn't like me that much, but that's okay. We love each other. But I was spoiled. I was the apple of his eye. And without realizing it, I transferred that responsibility to my husband when we got married. And he's an only child from New York, Air Force, 6'6", tall, dark, and handsome. And they love deep and they love rough and hard. Their love is just different. I'm gentle, affectionate. And so I was fighting for that. And at 53, I realized that I had took my dad's love as unconditional, but then I added perfect because he loved me perfectly as a dad could. I didn't have childhood trauma, which I'm so heartbroken for those that do and the number of people that sit through that. And so I learned that my dad's love was unconditional, but it's not perfect because only Christ's love is perfect. But every love after that, it needed to measure up to my dad's. And no one can measure up to that. We can't even measure up to the perfect love of Christ because that's not the goal. Grief took us by storm, and just walking through that with children is a whole situation that most moms, most women don't even know what to do with. And because there's been so much grief and loss with us, with kids, with extended family, sadly but beautifully, my husband and I have learned how to do the dance of grief. And we can now meet in that intersection where grief and sorrow collide. And God has taught us how to dance through that. And so it is hard. It is not fun. We ended up taking out all our past issues, childhood, grief uncapped that. And we just took it out on each other and was at that place. He asked for divorce. And I realized that when I said I do, this was my first marriage, I said I do to Christ. I had fell madly in love with Jesus. And so in me, I couldn't, but I wanted to. And so I'm like, Lord, how do I match my can't with want? How can we intersect that? And then I remember in my head, I was just sitting with the Lord, just crying out to him. And the thought came to me, when you're in the center of hell, why jump out then? Because then you're just going to be alone in the center of hell. And I thought, at least I have you here. And so we could beat each other up or do whatever. But after God just got a hold of me, I stopped trying to be my husband's Holy Spirit. I got fired 5,000 times, still kept applying, hired myself, fired again. But I finally got to Jesus and he's like, let's talk about you. Let's break you down, your pride, your anger, and all those things. I was like, not me, I'm perfect. Daddy loves me, right? So God got a hold of me, and probably a year and a half later, I turned and Preston was on his way up to Christ. And when I counsel couples, I tell them, when you imagine a triangle, we're always trying to connect at the widest part of the triangle. And that's a hot mess. But if I'm climbing up my side and he's climbing up his side, And it is absolutely at different paces. So whoever gets a little ahead, the goal isn't to look down and start throwing rocks and like, hurry up, get up here. So I had to learn that through breaking. And when we met at the tip, that's the closest we could be with Christ right in the middle. So he called us up, years of, excuse me, journey. I would say the last 7 years have been absolutely magical. Like, I can't wait to see him at the end of the day. We are best friends and we talk about everything. And whatever I was praying for in Christ, God blew right past that,
Wow.
blew right past it. And so I'm excited to share this. And I love that you said this isn't that chance, stay married at any cost. Don't leave, because there are situations, it takes two people.
Yes.
And when one's not willing and it's not safe, you've got to get out. But I do know that this side of hell is what Satan didn't want us to get to.
Wow, that is so good. It gave me chills when you said that because I'm like, man, I know that feeling. I know when you're in that fire, but I also have felt that sense of safety and satisfaction and excitement. And so to like know that there's this pendulum swing that's going to take place in our life and it likely is never going to pause, you guys. Right? Like that's not the point
Yeah.
of a pendulum to pause. It's meant to swing.
Yeah.
And for us to get into these rhythms of grace as a couple, I love when you shared, we understand how to dance with Jesus in grief and sorrow, because that's what it is. There's constant movement. I think of like standing next to the ocean, because that's where we live. And it never stops. Like there's no steady on the ocean. And yet there is so much peace there. But because I know when the tides change, and I know the promise of what it's actually providing. And I know the beauty of what actually is transpiring at the shoreline with that happening and the sand toiling and the pearls that are being sharpened and the animals that are being fed in the ecosystem. And so it's the comfortability, but I think this is why you need mentors and people who have gone before you, because you need to be reminded, hey, this can be beautiful. Hey, this can be safe. And what both of you guys have mentioned, and even Gary and I alluded to, but you guys were really proficient in sharing it, was it was not the pointing of fingers at the other person on this is what you need to fix, even though we're very clear what they need to fix.
Yes.
When the mirror got turned on us and God was like, hey, I want to focus on you for a bit. And whether that was out of a place of desperation or that was a stark like shock to us that we weren't perfect and we needed to do something about it, I think that it's really important for people to have those revelations and to be okay and in the discomfort of what that feels like. And also, this is why we chase Jesus pre-marriage. This is why we as parents and legacy leavers, even if we're not yet parents, are intended to help people walk the path of purity soon, as soon as possible. Even now, I and my husband we weren't sold out for the Lord when we got married. We knew Jesus, we prayed on our wedding day, but like we hadn't been encaptured by him yet. We didn't have those prodigal thought patterns of like, I've really been saved, here's your ring in the robe moments. That hadn't happened yet. It happened when we were married, which is hard. And the baggage that you bring into marriage because of those prodigal, promiscuous, impure exchanges with other people in the seeking of love, man, that makes marriage really messy. And so I am also in all of these conversations an advocate for purity and pure living and holiness and seeking Jesus as the single you before you ever decide to bring said baggage into a marriage, because God will get rid of that baggage before you get married and you can have a beautiful encounter. Yes, there will be sharpening. Yes, things will happen. But I was just on the phone with a friend this week and she's like, Tamra, I'm listening to your story and thank you so much for sharing. I don't even know what to say because I've never experienced something like that. She has 4 children. They've been married for 14 years and she just doesn't know hard the way that Gary and I know hard. And I told her, I said, praise God. I don't want you to walk into the mess that I've walked into. Both of them were raised knowing Jesus. They were married in purity. And I tell her, your marriage is a promise to me that my children can have the same experience in their marriage too. So please don't be looking for the big shoe to fall or the table to flip or the fire to go off in your life. Like, praise God that you can't relate to me. And that's okay. So I say all of that because someone might be on the other opposite end of this and be like, man, these people, they really struggled. Maybe I should be teaching about marriage. If you're listening and you have that feeling, maybe you should join the Sacrificial Love movement with us. Buy the book, sell the curriculum, teach it. Like, it's so necessary. And I wanted to say before we move on to Jennifer, Michelle, you had mentioned like some of the top reasons people do get divorced, and you were pretty accurate on what they were, but I wanted to be clear. The first is lack of communication. So the conflict, I told you the two flighters in the house, we don't need to fly away from the problem. Not going to work. Then you got the fighters, the people who want to go into it, and they're like throwing bows and words that are literally creating word curses over their spouse in that moment. Then you've got the freezers who don't know what to do at all. So figure out communication early on. That's why you need premarital counseling. Talk about these hard things that we're talking about. Second is infidelity and betrayal. This is one of those ones that you're like, yep, check. I can actually get out of said contract because this happened. I will tell you to press in because there's a promise on the other side of that too when that does happen, only because I've experienced it multiple times. 3, financial stress and disagreements. You mentioned the finance piece. Yes. This is really hard. 4 is growing apart or lack of intimacy. That would be the sex piece, but also just the emotional intimacy of not being seen or understood. This is why emotional affairs can take place because you just don't have intimacy and you're getting that from someone else. And then 5 is unrealistic expectations and unmet needs. I would say that would be a part of where that grief piece, probably Michelle, would come into play because there's no support on personal growth. There's no support and love, and you feel wildly isolated. And so the clarity of number 1 and having communication strategies is going to help the expectation side. Because if I can come to the table and be like, hey, right now, I just need you to be my friend. I just need you to be my encourager. I don't need to be my mentor or my coach, babe, because that's when my husband easily wears that hat. I'm like, just listen, okay? Just listen to me. So just understanding our roles in marriage is so critical. And did you want to say something to that, Michelle, before I jump into Jennifer sharing?
No, thank you for that clarification because that is so good. The root usually is lack of communication or dysfunctional communication. And now they have so many other options, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all these different things. And I'm like, what about a response of faith? Let's figure out what that will look like since we're putting all these other options in there that start with F. So that was
so good.
And
that is so powerful because the answer to all of these problems in some way, shape, or form is prayer, is worship, is coming to a place of utter surrender. That's what sacrificial love is. And he gives us in the word, the living word, a way out and a way through. And so knowing that there's tangible elements connected to that in this book, both with scripture and teaching and guiding you back to the word, that's what we really want to do. We're not like, hey, come and follow our marriages precisely, because that would not lead you anywhere but into another mess. We want you to follow Jesus and his ways through. And that's what we're really here to talk about. And Jennifer, you do this so beautifully in your chapter. And I think with the miscommunication and the ways that we fight and all of the pieces of those 5 ways, your chapter speaking to being unequally yoked is something I see often. I see that person that Michelle was talking about. They run up to the top and they've met Jesus and they're just like, what are you doing down there? Why are you staying? You're not helping. This is terrible. Just come meet Jesus with me. But they then look to you from a lens of religiosity rather than relationship. So let's hear about your story and what breaking idols looks like and ultimately building husbands. It's such a good chapter title.
Absolutely. So just like you guys have shared before, is that when we went into marriage, we were on the same level. We knew about Jesus. We were good knowers about ours, but we didn't have a strong relationship. I mean, we checked all the religious boxes. We went to the altar. We got baptized. We had our kids dedicated. But the thing is, we had kids out of marriage. And so we figured once we got married, oh, we're good now. Like, we're not breaking any rules. We're all good. And we had already settled that we had both come from broken families, and that was not going to happen for us. So without verbally saying it, I was putting on my hubby, like, okay, well, now you have to do all the things that my dad didn't do. So that means you stay. And that means that you deal with whatever it is I throw at you. And so we got to this point where God had really taken this time that we had apart, where he had taken um, to having to work outside of the home away. And God used that time, that extra time that I had, to really sit in me and meet me and really shine the light on what was broken inside of me. And I was starting this relationship with Jesus that I didn't even know was like tangible. And so as I was getting so excited, I'm like, you have to hear this. Like, man, we've done this so wrong and we've messed up so bad. And like, this is the way to do it. And when we're in hard moments, like, I know what to do now. Like, follow me. And he was like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm going to stay right here. I'm really comfortable where I'm at. It's like, no, you have to. And so in this chapter, it's through uh, these times with Jesus and walking through these hard moments where I had to be quiet. I had to stop talking and keep doing. And I had to display the actions that the Lord was asking me to do in respecting somebody who had been disrespectful, in leaving somebody better than I found them, and leaving a place better than I found it. And I had to just be quiet and show him what it was like to follow Jesus and to emulate that respect and that love and that care in moments that were really hard. And it was through that God was slowly pulling my fingers off of my husband until all I was left with was an open palm, and saying, all right, here are the things that are irritating me, bugging me. He needs to get this. Or I don't know if I can stay, or even wavering and going, I'm so afraid to continue to get to know you, God, because I'm afraid he's going to leave. I'm afraid he's not going to come. But God led me to just have this open hand. And it was as I was giving those things that were concerning to the Lord, then hubby started coming back and he's like, I had this thought. And I was like, oh, really? That's amazing. And after about 3 or 4 times, he was like, what is happening? And so I told him my secret, and I should have never done because now he uses it on me. And it comes back. But what that does is it allows us to reconnect. It allows us to realign. It allows us to, God to illuminate where we're at and like what we can do, actionable steps to come back together. And even though my husband did not officially write, we did an interview on his experience and his input on if you are the spouse and somebody, you're in that position, you're noticing them really kind of getting at you for the religious living, and they're really poking at you, that his input on what he thought about it and what might be happening and what you can consider by being that other spouse.
I love that his voice is represented inside of it. And I think regardless of how people write, like as you become one and you're in those spaces together, you start to sound like each other anyway. When Jerry was talking, I was like, I totally said that this morning in our thing and you just took it from me, but you can have it. It's yours. We're one. You can sound good. But like,
Right.
I love that you start to, create this imagery of Christ in tandem, because our weaknesses are each other's strengths and vice versa. But oftentimes we're just looking at the weaknesses and we're just pointing our fingers at them. And so I hope that this book allows people to do the opposite, right? It allows them to come, just like you said, Jennifer, like hands wide open before the Lord of like, hey, I love you so much. I want you to love my spouse just as much. And I want to love him like you love him, or her like you love her, because I can't do it. I can't do it in this season. I can't do it today. I'm tired. I can't do it tomorrow because I've got these responsibilities on my plate. Whatever that looks like, season by season, day by day, God wants to be the centrifuge, that third cord for you to come together and to pull you into intimacy with him. And that is what's going to create lasting marriages. As we close out this podcast, and just encourage you guys to go get the book, Sacrificial Love. It's available on Amazon. So I know you can get it free shipping to your house because I know you got an Amazon membership. It's going to be in Barnes & Noble and all the other stores here before long. I want you to know a quick sneak peek of the curriculum that's at the back, which I don't even know if the authors have fully seen this yet, which is exciting. It's called the Victory Marriage Curriculum. And this is something Gary and I have taught, and we're still teaching ourselves and learning about and adding to. V stands for volley, which is this experience of understanding, and everyone's chapter really alludes to it. There are seasons when you're going to be the strong one, quote unquote, where God is going to like literally be blessing you, where you're going to see freedom, you're going to experience strength and encouragement in a way that your spouse needs the overflow. And to understand those seasons clearly, and also practice awareness and communication to say, hey, where are you right now? What are you struggling with? What can I hold? What can you carry? And vice versa. There's an entire curriculum element connected just to volley, with exercises, discussion activities, ways for you to ponder and process. But that's V of the word victory. I is intimacy, which we talked about, a huge process in our marriage of understanding what intimacy looks like in the sanctity of marriage, and intimacy on all levels, just emotionally, spiritually, mentally, financially. And we say the phrase lights on love, and people immediately go to the bedroom. Sure, that's fun too. But let's think about it from the lens of all areas of our life, and turning the lights on in those places that we often haven't shared because we've been living in secrecy, sometimes so much that secrecy is suppression, and you just don't even know that it exists, which is a huge part of my story, and I know Kess can relate to as well. C is calling. And so stewarding each other's calling, processing what that looks like as a family, as a married couple, and walking into calling together. Oftentimes people are like searching their calling separately, but God put you into that same household, into that same marriage bed, as Steve alluded to, intentionally. So figuring out what does that look like together and finding some fun in that space. Then we've got T, which is time in. A lot of us want time out. When can I go on the girls' trip? When can I go on the guys' trip? I just need time away from you for a while. But just like our parenting strategy of not putting our kids in time out, we invited them into time in. We needed to learn after having kids and practicing time in, wait, what does this look like for our marriage? What does this look like for our legacy? Every single one of these letters also has a really profound prayer. There's an incredible book that I recommend. Hopefully you've read it before, by Stormy. I'm going to forget her last name if anybody can jump into it and tell me.
Mardian.
Oh, Mardian, thank you. And she does The Power of the Praying Wife and The Power of the Praying Husband. Profound work. You can stay in that book over and over and over again, and it breaks it down based on need that your husband or wife needs, and you jump right in. You don't even have to read it front to back. You can say, oh, they're having financial issues, let's go here. Oh, they're having intimacy issues, let's go here. Oh, they're having insert whatever the problem is. Stormy has addressed it. And so at the end of all of her things, she does like a war plan, and she did a prayer. And so I was inspired by Stormy, and I was like, oh my gosh, let me pray into this area. So there's profound prayers at the end as well. O for victory is ordinary, R is recipe, and Y is your time. And so I'm not going to give you all the details because you got to get into it. But I know that everyone that's in this book, they also have platforms. They also have podcasts. They also have coaching methodologies. I didn't even allude to the other authors. Our forward author, Dana Shea Williams, is absolutely incredible. And she's got the Rebuilding Us podcast. And she wrote the forward within a heartbeat for marriages based on her own testimony that she shares in the book. We've got Christina and Joe Blinko, who talk about choosing love over hurt. And we have Dr. Joshua and Randy Steinke, and they are Life Under a Microscope. They're about to be welcoming in, as this book comes out, their 8th child. So if you are a family of multiples, actually there's no twins, I don't think, in their multiples, but 8 children, like there's a parenting conversation happening as well as a marriage conversation. So it really is going to be such a service to you. We even created it to be really pretty, so it's more of a coffee table book than it is something you just throw on your bookshelf and forget about it. So blessed to do this with you guys, and to know that there's a full representation of different testimonies, which ultimately gives a full representation of Christ's glory. Is there any final words that anybody has that they're like, wait, we did a lot of conversation about marriage, but we can't forget this before we sign off?
I would just go back to, one of the comments I already made. We're talking to people that, obviously if you're listening and getting interested in this book, it's because there's probably something in your marriage, right? And you're not alone. And that's what you learn from this book, is that you're not alone. marriage isn't easy. I don't know where we ever got that idea that it was supposed to be easy. There's a lot of trials and struggles. Of course, you mentioned some things that you don't want to stick around for, but marriage, other than that, marriage is worth the fight, and these challenges that you have are, are just helping to shape you to be better. It's part of God's plan. It may not make sense to us. I guarantee it doesn't make sense to us. But it's all part of God's plans. And, over the, our time together, I've definitely, I stand here and I look back and I just see kind of the growth and such and all the struggles that we've been through, struggles we're going through, right? I mean, it doesn't end, right? It's not like, okay, we wrote the book, now it's done,
Yeah,
right? So
so
no,
good.
I mean it continues, but it's a journey. It's not a sprint. It takes time. So there's hope out there is I think the big thing, and it's not about finding happiness, right? You're not going to find happiness in marriage, but you definitely will find joy, and it's seeking out that joy. And just because you're not happy today with the other person, I mean, suck it up, move on to the next day, and just go from there. So. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So
Amen. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. I would just add, I love that there is hope. Don't give up the fight, and wrestle with God instead of your husband,
Ooh,
right? It
good.
just hit me the other day. I was listening to the Bible, and Jacob was wrestling with the man who was God, and was like, he wouldn't let him win. And all of a sudden it hit me like, it's God. He's going to win. Like, how does God not win? But then I thought Jacob wasn't giving up his will. And so the Lord touched him in his socket. And because he couldn't break his will, he broke him physically to depend on him. And so the closer we get to Christ, we see things differently. Hang in there.
So good. I think as we all are sharing the nuggets of wisdom that have been given to us, the other element that I love so much about saying yes to marriage and staying in it even when it's hard is the compassion that is grown not only for the one that you love and your significant other, but for other people. And I think this is the true testament of sacrificial love, is that he didn't just do it for me, and he didn't just do it for my husband, that he literally sent Jesus for all of his children. And so if our marriages can be representations to others to say yes to Jesus, golly, what an honor. What an honor. Would we fight? Would we fight again in the next battle? And my answer is going to be yes. And so we encourage you to stay in the fight and find out what happens on the other side. Ultimately, it's not going to just be you and your husband's freedom, the legacy of your families, but also the freedom for his children, his family, the bride of Christ. And that is what we're here for, to celebrate. So we love you guys. We're excited for you to get Sacrificial Love in your hands today. And if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten your book, be sure to go to Amazon.com and get it today. Pass one. Use it for a curriculum to teach if you want to bring other people in. Don't try to teach your spouse. That's not going to work out. But you can do what Jennifer says. Pray for them. Pray for them, pray for them, pray for them, and ask God to do the thing that you need to happen and watch what he does. It'll be a better idea than yours anyway. We love you. Thank you so much for joining the Messenger Movement podcast. And authors, you guys rock. I can't wait for it to be in your hands.